Okay, so in this video, we're going to go into the mixing and mastering process that you're going to use to clean up your sound design at the very end of the process. So now that you've got all your clips in the timeline, you've added your effects, you've kind of put everything where it needs to be. Now we're going to go into actually doing some cleanup mode, just fixing some things, getting them all tweaked and ready to go, adjusting levels, just doing our basic mixing and mastering process in order to get everything ready for the export. So I've got my project pulled up here in Premiere, and I'm going to go through in this video the 3 steps that I go through to finish out your sound design for the project. So the first thing that you're going to do is just adjust volume levels. Now, a lot of this is happening throughout the process. As you're adding clips in, you're going to be adjusting volume levels and getting things sounding right. But you want to go through and just do one final check with everything. So what you're going to do is play back your video and just make sure that the volume of everything sounds like where it needs to be, where you can hear the voiceover well on top of the music, you can hear the sound design below the music, everything just kind of fits in its place and feels okay. So let's play through a section of this and just see how it sounds.
Adventure is my game. I've been to extremes before. I've pushed the limits of my ability.
So to my ears, it's sounding like the voiceover is a little bit quiet and the music is maybe a little bit loud, so we're going to adjust that. And then we're also just going to look at kind of basic sound levels of things. So the first thing you want to pay attention to is just that your audio levels are right around the right place. So your audio should be hitting around -12 dB over here on your audio meter. So as I'm playing through it, you'll notice that our audio, when it's quiet right here, we're at about -18. And then we're just hitting kind of around this -12 range. We want to make sure that nothing is hitting 0 or above, because that's going to cause clipping or distortion in the audio. So as we're going through and checking this, I'm realizing that maybe the music is a little bit too loud, but maybe the voiceover is a little bit too quiet. And so we're going to make an adjustment there. I want to check the music track just to make sure when it gets louder in here that it's not the problem with the music. So let me play kind of back here. Let's see. So I'm going to go here where the music starts to get a little bit louder, about right here, and see what happens. Okay, so notice how we're starting to clip here in the music a little bit. So like I expected, I think the music is too loud. So what I'm going to do, you can either change the volume of a track right here on the track by using this bar and adjusting it here. As you can see, we've kind of done that here. With some keyframes, so I might just pull this keyframe down. We have this getting a little bit louder right here just to create a little bit more impact. I might pull that down a tiny bit, and then the second way you can do it is just to go into your audio tracks up here in this panel and just look into see, you can just adjust the entire track. So let's kind of play this back and see if we can get it about right. Pull that down so that it's just about hitting 0. Since this is the loudest part of the track, we want it to be a little bit loud, but we want to make sure that's not going above 0. And then let's see how that feels now with the voiceover back here.
I've been to extremes before. I've pushed the limits of my abilities.
Okay, so that feels a lot better. The music and the voiceover are feeling like they're kind of in the right place with each other. Now, the other thing you can do is you can use keyframes like you noticed over here. So, for example, we've got a clip right here where you can see it in the audio form, or the audio waveform right here. We've got this kind of spike that's happening right here. So you might have little moments like that you need to adjust. So let me play that back so you can hear how that sounds. There's just a little pop there because this is our footsteps sound effect. And for some reason there's this pop in there that we don't really like. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to use keyframing just to pull that out by itself. So I'll put keyframes here, and then one here, and just kind of do a little drop in the volume level just like that on this clip. That way we don't hear that sound effect anymore. Okay? So that's the first step of the mixing process, just going through and checking your volume levels and making sure that everything is about where you want to be. Now, the second step is to add crossfades. So every bit of sound design that you have in here, all of your audio clips that you have in here, you want to make sure that there are crossfades on the beginning and the end of every clip and in between clips that are touching. Now you notice that most of these have these already, and I've done a good job of that going throughout, but there are some of them that haven't. So for example, this one over here doesn't have a crossfade on the beginning of it. You're going to want to put those on just about every single clip. The reason is because when there's an abrupt change in audio, whether it's an audio track starting or an audio track ending, and there's no crossfade, sometimes you can end up with weird pops or artifacts that you don't want. If you're editing on computer speakers like I am, a lot of times you won't be able to hear those, but then if somebody puts headphones on, they're going to be able to hear it really well. And so you just, to clean everything up and just to make sure you're not dealing with that, I recommend just putting a crossfade on the beginning of every track. Now you don't want to cut out the audio, obviously. This isn't going to be a long crossfade like these are at the beginning where we have the audio slowly fading in at the beginning of the video, but we want to put on just a short crossfade just to make sure that it's fading in rather than just abruptly starting. So I'm going to do that on every single clip and make sure that we have a crossfade at the beginning and the end of each one. And then any spots where we have two clips that are right up next to each other, we'll do the same thing in between them and just add a very short crossfade between them just to allow the clips to blend together a little bit, which will help with the same problem. Now, once you've done that, then the third step is to go into really the mixing process. And this is where you could start grouping different tracks together and giving them different effects or volume levels based on what they are. So if you notice in our timeline here, in our first track, we've got the music track playing. On our second track, we've got the voiceover, and then all of the rest of our tracks are sound effect tracks. Now, they're not specifically like this isn't a footsteps track or a traffic sound effect. We just have a lot of sound effects that are kind of all over the place. And so it's really easy for me to add effects or to change things on the music or the voiceover. But if I wanted to add any kind of effect or volume change to all of the sound effects, for example, that would be a little bit harder to do. So here's how you fix that. The first thing we're going to do is go in and create what are called submixes, which is basically like a group of tracks that you can edit together. So what I want to do is go in here and just start naming our tracks in our audio panel. Let me close this for a second. So our first track here is going to be our music track. So I'll just type music there. Our second track is going to be the voiceover. I'll put VO. And then audio 3 is going to be, we'll call that sound effects 1. We'll do sound effects 2, sound effects 3, and sound effects 4. Now you notice that the only way for me to adjust volume levels of all the sound effects would require me to have to go in and adjust the faders for every single one of these. So the way you can fix that is using what's called a submix. So if I right click on any of these tracks and I click add audio submix track, that's going to create what's called submix 1 down here, and you'll notice that it's added another track to this. Now all of these tracks by nature are going to automatically be output to the master channel. So you have a master channel over here that is your final mixing and mastering track where all of the audio gets routed into that one channel. So you can actually change that. If I go on tracks 3 through 6, I want to change the output to be not master but to be submix 1. So I'll do that on all of these. That means that all of the audio on each of those 4 tracks is now being routed into this submix track, and then that submix track is outputting to the master. So what it means is that I can adjust this fader and it will adjust all of my sound effects tracks for me. So I'll go ahead and play back and show you how that works.
Adventure is my game. I've been to extremes before. I've pushed the limits of my abilities.
Okay, so see how I can adjust all of my sound effects by themselves. So submixes are really powerful. If you have a lot of tracks and things start to get a little bit crazy, you can start to group together specific types of audio, so like your sound effects, your voiceover, your music, into their own groups so that you can affect them separately. And then the last step of this whole process is to add mixing and mastering effects and volume changes to your groups as a whole. So for example, let's say I felt like throughout the entire video all the sound effects were a little bit loud. I would just bring them down a little bit here like that, or if I felt like the voiceover needed to be a little bit louder, I could do that right here, always watching my audio meters and making sure that everything looks okay. And then I can also add effects to the track. So if you click this little arrow up here at the top, It'll bring down your effects columns here. Just like we talked about adding EQ and compression and reverb and all those effects to specific clips within your video, well, you can also do those to specific tracks. So I could add a little bit of compression to the entire voiceover track, or I could add a little bit of reverb to the entire mix if I wanted to for some reason, or EQ. And then you can also do that on the master track. So on our master track here, we could add some compression or some limiting or some EQ to just kind of brighten up the entire mix or adjust the audio levels there. So that's the process that I go through to do a final master on the entire video. Just make sure that everything is cleaned up and that the volume levels are good, we're not clipping, and everything sounds great. So there you go. There is the sound design process. Now that you've got all your sound design in there, you've got it all cleaned up, mixed, mastered, ready to go. You're ready to export the sound. Now it's time for us to move on to color grading, which is what we're going to cover in the next section.